get caught by police, you regret, you start thinking, how stupid it was for you to get in a car after drinking.
Why wait for X amount of years until that happens and look back from that point and say, why didn't I do something about it?
How can we transform a really bad situation into something very positive? Sometimes something bad has to happen to us in our life before we realize that what we're doing is not productive and it's leading us to disaster. So the good example would be, let's say you're having a drinks, every weekend, and after that you're driving back home. And everything is fine for years and you get complacent. Even though on a conscious level you realize that what you're doing is really bad, because you never get caught. You just continue doing this thing, even though it's self-destructive. And sometimes, finally, when you get caught by police, you regret, you start thinking, how stupid it was for you to get in a car after drinking, and now you've lost your license for a year, maybe even longer. And just think to yourself, why the heck was I so stupid? I would never do anything like that again. And most often, in situations like that, people have such a big change of heart that they would never get in a car ever again, under no circumstances, after having a drink. And these are not bad people. It's just the situation never really forced them to make that big of a change. Not only that, sometimes people who do something stupid like that, they would come to realization that maybe I do have an alcohol problem and maybe I do have to address it. But until somebody literally shakes you out of, the situation, you don't see it. You're so biased. You think that everything is fine. And only such a huge disaster can wake you up.
Yeah, so sometimes it sounds like what you're describing is how useful it can be to you when bad things happen, because you can utilise that to change. And it's like maybe you didn't even, maybe it wasn't something you chose, it wasn't something you would have chosen, but life forced you to reevaluate and to change in a way that ultimately you think was a healthy choice, although it wasn't really a choice because it was forced on you. And maybe you can utilise that. So what I think about in my life, so smoking, giving up smoking. So lots of people want to give up smoking. And if you ask people why do they want to give up smoking, usually they give you a list of about 10 things. And it's all the same reasons that people want to give up smoking. For their health, for their because of the money, because they're addicted, because they're because of the smell, because of the antisocial aspect, because of the influence on their kids. All these different reasons, it's the same sort of reasons. But if you ask them to put them in an order, a hierarchy, they'll put them in all different orders. So, yeah. So, one of the thing that probably broke the back for me, I suppose I'm using a psychological hack to do exactly what you're talking about. I thought to myself, if I went to the doctor and the doctor said, you're going to die in 5 years because you got lung cancer from smoking, I knew that I would give up instantly, as lots of people probably would. And that's a bit like what you're describing. It's like life smacks you really hard and you're like, okay, going to have to change this, going to have to do something about it. You're not going to choose that. So anyway, the point of my story was I said to myself, why wait for X amount of years until that happens and look back from that point and say, why didn't I do something about it? Why not project myself into the future and make the choice now while I still can, instead of waiting to be told that? Why not utilise that transformational power that I would do then? And there's no doubt about it. You do amazing things when you feel you have to, whether you're the guy in the film 27 hours where he falls in the canyon and his arm's trapped and he's stuck there for ages and it's looking pretty obvious he's going to die if he doesn't do something extreme, and he takes out his penknife and cuts off his arm. It's like, ask people to imagine. Well, that's what the film asks you to do. It asks you to imagine, would you do this? Could you do this? And a lot of people say, oh, I couldn't do it. It's like, well, maybe you could. You'd be amazed at what you could do if you tell yourself a story that you really have to. So yeah, am I getting at what you're talking about with when life forces you to do things? Or
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you've presented a really nice example that you're able to utilize that, for your benefit. And as a result, you're able to quit. The problem is most people, even though on a conscious level, they have that list of 10 things that, yes, which let's say a cancer is at the very top of that list. But even though they know this can potentially kill them, so the decision that they're making is actually a subconscious decision. And oftentimes, people need something really drastic to happen before they can actually force themselves to make a change. And surprisingly, when something that disastrous happens, something just shifts in your mind. And something that was extremely difficult to do before takes no effort at all to commit, which is unbelievable. So what I'm trying to say is that let's say you're coming home after a week's work on Friday, and you're having a couple of drinks. And after a couple of drinks, you're having an argument with your wife, who's telling you that maybe you have a drinking problem. But then you completely ignore that, and you think, oh, you're just, delusional, whatever. And, you want to deprive me of having a little bit of pleasure at the end of the day. But then one day you come home and you do this stupid thing, you black out and you say something really horrible to your partner. And you don't even know what you said. And she's being extremely upset. And next thing you know, she's telling you that she's going to leave you and going to take kids unless you do something, about your problem. When she presents the case to you in that way, there are two outcomes. If you really care about your family, it will be a no-brainer for you. You're just going to say, okay, shit. It's not worth it, not going to have, a single drop of alcohol ever again because my family is too important for me. And for these people, that will be incentive enough. For other people who don't really care that much, they could go, the other way. Also, what we have to add here is that, there are different levels of addictions or bad habits that, some people, all they will need is a situation like that. But for others, the habit is just, too difficult to control. And even though they really love their family, they cannot overcome the obstacle that led them to the situation, which is quite sad. But that's, that I've diverted slightly away from the main point of the discussion. The main point of this discussion is that how horrible situation that on the face of it looks like a disaster can turn into, one of the most wonderful things that happen in your life. So for me, I used to be a smoker as well. So my wife told me that I had to quit or else she would leave. And at the time, I was really into smoking, and I tried to hide it. I tried to do it, on the side. But ultimately, she came to me and she said, well, unless you choose me over cigarettes, this is it. So that was big enough incentive for me just to completely change the way I look at, smoking cigarettes. And I gave up. But I needed that disastrous, picture in my mind because I was in love with my wife so much. I'm still in love with her. But at the very early stages of a relationship, as you know, this fire in you is so strong that anything that potentially threatens it, will work as a huge deterrent to whatever behavior or thing you do. So that's another example of something that at the time felt horrible because I loved smoking so much. It brought me so much pleasure. And, I could relax when smoking, and there was something about sitting with a cigarette and relaxing. And even though I knew it was bad for me, even though I knew that, potentially in 10, 15 years down the line, I could end up, with cancer or some coronary heart disease or whatever, the instant gratification was, on the forefront of what I was saying, and everything else like, oh yes, it's in the future. I'll think about it in the future. But that's how it worked for me, last time. So what's the punchline? I guess the punchline is that sometimes when we think that something horrible happens in our life that forces us to change the way we live, to change our bad habits, or to change the circumstance altogether, it can be a really, really good thing. In fact, if you look at your past, probably one of the most horrible examples, the things that happened to you, led you to where you are right now. And if it wasn't for these disastrous situations that you ended up in at the time, you wouldn't be here where you are. You wouldn't have learned the lessons. So it's important to have these bad experiences and try to reframe it. Try to see the light at the end of the tunnel and potentially utilize it. Utilize it for your own benefit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that the things that you kind of analyze and look at are control. So where do you have control and where do you not have control? So you don't have control sometimes of what comes into your life, what consequences comes into your life. Like maybe you steal something from a shop and you get away with it and you get away with it and you get away with it and then you get caught. And then that comes into your life and maybe it forces you to change your ways. Maybe it's there's so many examples, and everybody will have so many examples in their life of how this plays out. Maybe you're quite cheeky, and you're cheeky, and then you meet somebody who's not going to put up with that, and they give you a slap, or whatever happens, or the circle, or your social circle rejects you because of that. It's like so many times. So what's the takeaway? The takeaway is it's twofold. There's two things that are really good to look at. One is some things will just come into your life. It's the nature of life. You're progressing through it, and there's things that just come into your pathway that are unavoidable, and things that are avoidable. So it's like, what are you going to do? How are you going to frame those in a good way? Like you're talking about looking at it in a positive way and reacting to that. So reacting to the things that come into your life is one aspect. So that's the control that you have, and you don't have control over some of those things. The other aspect is what I was looking at to begin with, which was, can you hack it? Can you use that? Can you utilize that to control where your life goes to some extent, to control your choices? And so that's what I did with the smoking idea. I said, well, I looked into the future and says, well, I'll do some forward plan here. And I gave that as an example because it makes me look good. I'll give you lots of examples to make me look bad, because it does. Things like that come in your life, and they are helpful sometimes. So yeah, those are a few different useful aspects that everybody has many examples of in their own life where things have come into their life and it's changed their direction, the course of their life and their choices and different and who they are, who they become. So yeah, I think it's about enjoying the journey. I think that's the takeaway. The takeaway is like, when you can have some control of something, it changes your relationship with it. When you can kind of step out of a situation, it changes your relationship with it. When life's just happening to you and you're being forced and it feels like you're in a cage and people are just like commanding you and telling you what to do, it's just not a pleasant experience. It's the same with pain, like a relationship with pain. When somebody inflicts pain on you, it's like, right, I'm going to cut this tooth out or something. It's like, whereas like, you can have a different relationship where somebody's like, right, we're going to have to cut this tooth out, and they explain why, and you're like, okay, I accept it. Okay, fair enough. This is what we need to do. But I'm going to like cut a little bit of time, and if the pain gets above like a 5 on a 1 to 10 scale, we're going to stop. You just put your hand up, and you're like, all right, okay. So your relationship is different. You have more control, and yeah, it just changes the experience. It makes it much more pleasanter. So yeah, those. Maybe I'm diving in pretty heavy on that, but it's all very useful life stuff. So, yeah, it's the stuff I wish somebody would have said to me earlier on in life.